Dear Brian, dear Anna, thank you so much for the invitation and your team for all the organization making this possible. It's a great honor to be here and to speak to you today. It is my deepest pleasure to guide you in some examples through our collections, which we house at the Museum Schloss Fürstenberg, and to show you how we try to attract people to porcelain from the past and the present and maybe the future. The story starts in 1747, when Duke Charles I of Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel gave order to establish a porcelain factory at Fürstenberg Castle. The castle had been abandoned for at least 100 years, being home to bats and rats only. It seemed convenient to transform it into a factory, as the facility was there, and there was also plenty of firewood coming from the nearby Solling Mountains. Later, kaolin was found there as well, which is pretty extraordinary, as Fürstenberg was independent from the kaolin from Passau. But it was not an easy task to set up production. Over a couple of years of failure followed by failure, and it was not before 1753 that the production was running smoothly. Since then, the kilns in Fürstenberg never ran out. During 275 years, the factory underwent many transformations and had to deal with several crises in the past and in present days. Still existing today and currently operating with increasing success, documents its ability to change. The ancient castle was converted into a manufactory at first. During the 19th century, as you can see on the left image, it became a more mass-producing factory, and finally, in the 20th century, it was transformed into a museum. Here on the right side, you can see the deconstruction of the buildings erected during the 19th century to enhance working space. And the castle, which goes back to the Middle Ages, was then transformed completely into a museum, although the first museum was opened in the late 1950s. The like was the development of the range of products, ever-changing in design and quality. And thus, it is our aim to document past and present and to introduce our visitors as well as Fürstenberg's workforce to the checkered history. In the beginning, the arcanum was the biggest challenge. It wasn't easily obtainable, as we all know. Duke Charles put his hope in Johann Christoph Glaser, a porcelain painter from the workshop of Friedrich Metsch in Bayreuth. He claimed to be in possession of the arcanum, but he was a complete miscast, and he wasn't able to achieve what the Duke was longing for. In fact, he was a fraud who mocked up his abilities by presenting some self-decorated Meissen cups when he showed up at court offering his services. Although being an impostor, Glaser was clever enough to produce some minor successes, or at least faking them, so that the setup of production facilities went on over the years continuously. In the end, his lies were unmasked. This was the moment of Johann Kilian Benkgraf, the successful arcanist of the Höchst manufactory, who was hired in 1753, and he delivered the desperately needed know-how. There are some very exciting objects in our collection from these very early stages of production. At first, this cup and saucer, the painting is attributed to Glaser. The shape is clearly inspired by Meissen models, and the decor resembles those from the Metsch workshop. One might notice the limited range of colors a fact that is confirmed by written records complaining about the difficulties to produce proper enamels. It is said that Glaser had imported powdered pigments from Bayreuth. This early dessert plate is similar in color. It is one of our historical highly important objects because there is good evidence of it belonging to the first service ordered by Charles I. The Duke wished to get a table service in December 1753 for his private use, and he made precise specifications about the decor. Flowers, but simple and few, scattered with taste, as the Duke wrote in his order. So you can discuss the option of taste here, but it is very rarely that we have written records so close to a specific object. The so-called Schäferleuchter, a candelabra with a shepherdess and a shepherd, by Simon Fallner, is the first known sculptural item made in Fürstenberg. Fallner had created this model while he was working in Höchst before. It is to assume that he took the molds with him when he followed Bengraf to Fürstenberg. The view of the bottom side shows all the fantastic signs of our early production. Firecracks, impurities, supports telling their own story of technical challenges to overcome. But skills developed quite fast, proved by this depiction of fides, faith, from a series of virtues by Johann Christoph Rombrich. Compare the bottom sides. Rombrich, trained in Meissen at Kendler's workshop as a former, entered Fürstenberg in 1758. Obviously, he wasn't the most talented of Kendler's apprentices. His training focused more on the technical side of the production of figurines. But he internalized the Meissen style, transitioning from late Baroque to Rococo, and developed an individual style without the refinement of an academic education. The search for how to get along with the material artistically produced the specific charm of the early Fürstenberg production. Fine examples are these two platters shaped in the common tournée style with an extraordinary decor in underglaze blue on the left and a luscious still life of fruit and vegetables on the right. With increasing success, both in technologies and sales, Fürstenberg became more and more attractive for artists from near and far. They had a great impact on the further artistic development. Flower painting, for example, was formed by Christian Gotthelf Beuchel in particular. In 1759, he also came from Meissen, where he had been trained as a porcelain painter. Starting from the typical Meissen Manierblumen, he created an individual style which is characterized by a refined brushwork, multicolored detailing, and the inclusion of the white porcelain ground in a masterly way. With Johann Friedrich Pascha Weitsch, Fürstenberg made art history. The former soldier, self-taught as an artist, entered the factory in 1756, shortly before the 7 Years' War broke out. His pre-romantic approach to landscape painting on porcelain, using own plein-air sketches instead of etchings, revolutionized the genre. His magnum opus is without doubt a large dinner service ordered by Charles I. Painted with landscapes from the Braunschweig duchy only, it displayed the duchy on the table, thus representing the Duke's dominion. Today, half of the service can be found in the royal collection at Windsor Castle. It was a gift to Princess Caroline of Braunschweig on the occasion of her marriage with the Prince of Wales, the later King George IV. and we all know that poor Caroline ended pretty miserable and returned to Braunschweig, in fact, but not alive. For a brief period, so getting to something more funny, for a brief period from 1767 to 77, Andreas Philipp Oethner worked at the painter's workshop before he left for Vienna. Because of his unique style, this pair of potpourri vases can be easily attributed. You just have to take a look at his figurine, see the childlike proportions, and look those figurines in the eyes, in the faces, and you recognize his typical fish eyes, and you know you have something from Oethner in front of you. The benefits of know-how from Meissen influenced overglaze painting as well as underglaze decoration. With Georg Friedrich Geisler, another skilled Meissen workman switched to Fürstenberg. He introduced the omnipresent Zwiebelmuster, although it remained a rarity in our range of decors. So far, only 5 objects are known. 3 of them can be found in our collection. The employment of the sculptor Desauches illustrates another interesting resemblance to Meissen. Just like Michel Victor Assier in Saxony, at the same time Desauches was expected to bring in the newest fashion from Paris. Unfortunately, little is known about the artist. It is said that Desauches was an apprentice of Pierre-Philippe Mignon, but only his years in Fürstenberg are documented. During his 5-year stay from 1769 on, Desauches created several mythological as well as allegorical figurines and groups, among them the so-called Kaffeegesellschaft, his main work. Another and at the moment for now, another and the last for now, example of Meissen influences on Fürstenberg is this chimney clock, which shows that craftsmanship had reached the highest standard. With the end of the century and the transition from Rococo to Neoclassicism, Fürstenberg faced new challenges like all the other manufactories in Central Europe. Many of them, like Höchst, Frankenthal and Ludwigsburg, weren't able to fulfill the requirements of the new era on the long run. In contrast, Fürstenberg had their heyday in the 1770s and achieved profits for the first time. New collections were formed like a wide range of portrait busts, which were welcomed by the customers. Besides portraits of various personalities from past and present, copies after popular ancient sculptures were offered. The bust of Henry the Lion is remarkable. Princes from the Middle Ages weren't a common subject in porcelain, of course, apart from the series of emperor busts from Meissen. This streak of good luck was in danger when Napoleon Bonaparte troubled Europe. After conquering the duchy and creating the new kingdom of Westphalia, with his brother Jerome installed as king, Fürstenberg was neglected. Jerome wasn't interested in commodities coming from the region at first. He preferred French goods. But thanks to the efforts of Louis-Victor Gervereau, who was in charge since 1797, Fürstenberg was appointed Manufacture Royale finally. And then the factory supplied the newly established court in Kassel with tableware and many decorative items. The so-called Markgräfinnen-Service, a gift to Markgravin Amalia of Baden, demonstrates the high level of quality which was achieved in this time. She was the mother-in-law of the heir to the throne in Braunschweig, and the service was given to her on the occasion of the birth of her first grandchild. Originally, it consisted of around 250 pieces. 47 remained in the Baden family until 1995, when they were sold in Sotheby's famous Baden auction. The Richard Borek Stiftung in Braunschweig acquired them a little later from a German dealer and handed them over to our museum on a permanent loan. Painter Heinrich Christian Brüning created the decor, and the centerpiece of 9 vases is of special interest. They show allegorical motifs of love and family, but remain enigmatic without certain interpretation so far. So, all colleagues creative in iconography and iconology are welcome to visit to solve this puzzle. With the ongoing of the 19th century, all the disruptions, whether political, economical, or social, changed the factory. A new customer base arose with the up-and-coming bourgeoisie. New product ranges at lower prices were then introduced. Production costs were cut down by simplifying the decoration and finally by introducing printed decors. The level of quality dropped. In 1859, the ducal factory was handed over to private entrepreneurs, which marked the end of an era. Fürstenberg became a supplier of ordinary household goods, but had to fight against the powerful new factories in Silesia and Bavaria. Really hard times. In this particular situation, Fürstenberg's history and tradition was rediscovered. Regarding the great success of the royal factories in Meissen and Berlin, traditions seemed to become a competitive advantage. Today, we would call it an USP. The perfect occasion to remind the public of Fürstenberg's existence and significance came with the 150th jubilee of its foundation in 1897. It was largely celebrated, and the inherited stock of figural models from the 18th century went into production again. This he-goat, originally modeled by Simon Fallner on the left side, was made as a gift for the guests who attended the celebrations of the Jubilee. It bears a specific mark which shows the date of the celebration beside the blue F, and the number 4777 indicates the number of firings since privatization. The new self-esteem and regained attention led to ambitious new creations like the monumental dragon vase on the right side. Obviously, it is inspired by the opulence and the technical mastery of the products of the Berlin manufactory. Jugendstil or Art Deco took its toll with both floral and more geometrical designs, but without creating a proper contemporary image of the collection. The quality was still on the mediocre side because of the difficulties to stay strong on the market. Fürstenberg competed on price primarily. Greater success came with reproduction of historical tableware and vases. These products were upvalued by the aura of the tradition and luxury, just like items from Meissen or Berlin, but at lower prices. After World War I, a decoration workshop was established in Dresden to expand this certain part of the collection. War memorabilia were another idea to reach out to new customers. During the 1920s, shapes and decors in Art Deco style came up, but they didn't last long and weren't of great economical success. The product range looked like the potpourri of historicized design and fashionable novelties complemented with numerous decors. Thus, the collection's profile and furthermore, the image of the factory were hard to recognize. Things changed slowly with designer Wilhelm Wagenfeld, a student of the Bauhaus, who created his iconic functional tableware 639 in 1934. Clear in shape and without the fuss of any dispensable ornament, this was an important step into the future. Chief modeler Walter Nitsche continued on this path after World War II. The service 666 von Langen was presented at the World Exhibition in Brussels in 1958 as an example of exceptional modern German design. But a number of dealers criticized the design for being too modern. A designer's life resembles Don Quixote's fight against windmills sometimes. A clear duality was the cornerstone of the product policy during the second half of the 20th century. More or less exact copies of historical models on one hand and innovative contemporary designs on the other. The historical series were the moneymakers, whilst new and modern shapes demonstrated that Fürstenberg was able to live in the present as well. This was the task of industrial designer Ernst August Sundermann, who delivered most of the design from the 60s onwards. Sometimes Fürstenberg was even ahead of time. The mocha service EOS by Heinrich Wenisch, here on the right side, from 1985, was the first postmodern tableware produced by a German factory. Collecting, documenting and presenting the ongoing efforts to renew the idea of high-quality porcelain is a key function of our museum. Every new design becomes a part of the collection immediately. Among those, just for example, are creations by Korean artist Kapsung Wang on the left side, or the groundbreaking tableware My China by the brothers Michael and Christian Sieger, who form the Sieger Design Agency. With more than 100 different pieces which can be freely combined, My China is an invitation to individuality. With Tony Craig's sculpture Point of View, Fürstenberg showed that porcelain is a material suitable for contemporary art. And last year, commemorating the 275th Jubilee, London was calling with Foster and Partners and their radical datum, surprising the public with the first French press coffee pot ever made in porcelain. Being the appropriate display for the collection, the museum is the place where the public is enabled to get in contact with Fürstenberg. This takes place in our permanent exhibition, which informs about the manufacturies past and present. It is crucial that we don't want just to educate our visitors, but we want to inspire them and arouse curiosity to induce a new passion for the unique material. There are several points where visitors can touch and play with porcelain, and there's our visitors' workshop, where people can watch and talk to working craftsmen and women, and where they can even become porcelain painters themselves. Our study gallery enriches our permanent exhibition with around 3,000 objects in a mystically staged room like a treasure chamber. When we were planning this room, I told the architects and designers that I want something mysterical and grand and functional, of course. To make it short, that I want a mini V&A. Now, and that's what they delivered. Now, visitors can delve into the most comprehensive display of Fürstenberg porcelain, and the museum's director has a playroom. I already mentioned that new design is getting into our collection, but there is more. We love to initiate art projects to broaden the horizon. Last year, for example, artist Songat Marx created an installation during a 2-month residency at the museum, titled bleibt anders, stay different. She interpreted this 275 years old tradition of Fürstenberg in her own approach and style. To conclude this lecture, the incomparable Reichmann collection has to be mentioned, which is on permanent loan with us since 2015. Over decades, Max Gerd Reichmann assembled a collection of around 500 fine objects, mainly from the early production until 1770. We reserved a special showcase for this collection in our study gallery, where it can be seen in its entirety. Among the superstars of this collection are 4 dessert plates from a service made for Duke Charles I around 1755, painted with landscapes in puce color. And thanks to Reichmann, we finally have an original figurine from Simon Fallner's Commedia dell'arte series under our roof. For sure, the most painful gap in our collection, as we have only modern recreations from the 1970s and later. And just because 1960, Hans Weinberg was the winner in the auction and not the factory who was interested in the only existing complete series of Commedia dell'arte figure, which maybe some of you know are today in the Pflüger collection in Boston. And here the circle closes with 4 more virtues by Rombrich from the Reichmann collection, which are favorites, at least of mine. The special role of our museum and its collection has to be emphasized in regard to the operating manufacturing. Customers are welcome to learn about and understand the brand's tradition, and the collections are an important source of inspiration for artists and designers. But for me, the most important thing is that we reach new target groups through our collections and our work with these collections, and thus giving porcelain a future as one of the most beautiful materials. Thank you.